He saw it all through the warped, turn-of-the-century glass of the conservatory. The man in the garden, Elias, did not move. He was 58 years old, and for the last 10 of them, he had perfected the art of not being seen. He was a creature of the peripheral, a gray shape that existed only to prune, to weed, to mulch. He was less a person than a function. But now, he was watching. The black van had been silent, gliding up the long gravel driveway with an electric hum that was, in itself, a statement of professional intent. 4 men, not thugs, not locals. They moved with a fluid, disciplined geometry that made the cold dread rise in Elias' throat. They were not here to rob. They were here to acquire. He saw them breach the French doors. He saw Richard Thorne, the master of the house. A man of bullish confidence turned from his antique desk, his face a mask of sudden, arrogant confusion. He saw Mary Thorne, his wife, drop her porcelain teacup, her mouth opening in a silent, perfect O of terror. And he saw Julian. Julian, the 40-year-old son, the prodigal heir, was with them. No, not with them. He was arguing with them. This wasn't the deal. Julian was screaming, his voice thin and reedy. "No," I said. "No one gets hurt. I just wanted to scare them." This wasn't the deal. A 5th man, the leader, stepped out of the van. He was older. He didn't rush. He walked calmly to Julian, backhanded him across the face, a sharp, economical strike that sent the younger man sprawling onto the priceless Persian rug, and then pointed his weapon. Not at Julian, but at Richard Thorne. "The deal," the leader said in a thick, Eastern European accent, "has changed." Elias did not breathe. The world, for him, had suddenly, sickeningly, folded in on itself. This formation, the cross-entry, the way the leader controlled the fatal funnel of the doorway, the brutal, efficient, emotionless strike. It was not a memory. It was a sensory replay. The smell of diesel and damp concrete, the sound of a woman screaming, her voice cutting off into a wet gurgle. The agonizing, paralyzing, cold cinder block of failure. It was Berlin. It was 10 years ago. It was the night Anya died. Elias' hands, the calloused, steady hands of a gardener, began to tremble violently. His PTSD, the wolf he kept chained in the cellar of his mind, was now at the door. It was happening again, and he, as always, was just the man in the garden, useless, frozen, a coward. He wanted to run. He needed to run. The terror was absolute. He closed his eyes. To run, however, would be to break character. Elias had not run in 10 years. He had simply faded. His life at the Thorne estate was a masterpiece of non-existence. He was the slow gardener, the man who would take an entire afternoon to weed a single flower bed. His movements deliberate. His head always down. The Thornes, Richard and Mary, had purchased the estate 5 years ago. They were new money, desperate to be old money. They collected things, art, cars, exotic birds, and a vast, complicated garden they did not understand. Elias had come with the property, a relic from the previous owner. The Thornes kept him on, mostly out of inertia. To them, he was a tool, and a faulty one at that. Just 2 days ago, Richard Thorne had summoned him to the patio. Richard was a big man, florid in the face, a man who believed his wealth made him an expert in everything. He was pointing, his finger jabbing, at a magnificent 8-foot rhododendron Augustini, an azalea with blossoms the color of a pale sapphire. "This," Richard had bellowed, his voice echoing in the morning mist. "Look at it. It's wilting. I paid $12,000 for that plant at auction." 12. Elias had looked. He kept his eyes down. "Sir, it is a root fungus. The soil is too damp here. I was preparing a copper fungicide." "Fungus?" "He'll tell you what it is. It's incompetence. It's you." I pay you God knows why a salary. Do you have any idea how much this one plant is worth? It is worth more than a year of your pathetic salary. It is worth more than you." Elias said nothing. He just stood there, absorbing the words. They were not new. He had been told he was worthless by far more important men than Richard Thorne. "I want it fixed," Richard continued. "And I don't want to hear your excuses. If that plant dies, I will take it out of your pay. Now get out of my sight. Go. Go cut some grass. Try not to screw that up." Mary Thorne had watched the entire exchange from the sunroom, her face a mask of bored agreement. She, too, saw the gardener as nothing more than a slow, dim-witted functionary. Julian, the son, was worse. Julian was 40, but he carried the frantic, hollow energy of a perpetual teenager. He visited on weekends, always in a different, too expensive sports car. Always on his phone, his voice a low, desperate murmur. Elias, invisible as he was, saw everything. He saw the gambler's twitch in Julian's eye. He saw the fine tremor in his hands when he thought no one was looking. He saw the way his business calls always left him pale and sweating. Julian treated Elias with a different kind of contempt, not the explosive rage of his father, but the dismissive, bored cruelty of the young. The day before, Julian had been pacing the lawn, his phone pressed to his ear. "I told you, I have the money," he was hissing. I need time to move it." "You can't." "No, you listen to me." Elias, 20 yards away, was silently operating a manual edger. It made almost no sound. Julian, enraged, clicked off his phone and saw him. "My God, do you ever stop?" Julian snapped. Elias froze. "Sir, lurking. You're always lurking. Creeping around like some kind of garden gnome. It's pathetic." Elias just looked at his edger. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Julian." "Your job?" Julian laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. This is your job? Trimming the edges? Is this what you dreamed of when you were a boy, Elias? One day, I'm going to trim the perfect edge." He stepped closer, his cologne, sharp and expensive, washing over Elias. "You know what I did this morning? Before 9 a.m.? I moved $500,000 in a derivatives trade. I made more than your entire life is worth. And you're trimming grass." He shook his head, a parody of pity. "Do us all a favor. If you're going to be slow, be slow. Over there." "You're depressing me." Elias had simply nodded, picked up his tools, and faded back into the shrubbery. He had not been angry. He had been analytical. He had seen the desperation behind the bravado. He had catalogued the fear, and he had dismissed it. It was not his problem. Nothing was his problem. His only problem was Berlin. Berlin was 10 years ago. It was a safe-house extraction. Simple. In and out. His partner, Anya, a brilliant 8-year-old analyst he loved like a daughter, was on overwatch. He was the gardener, the cleaner, the one who went inside. But he had made a mistake. He had missed the secondary trigger on the door. He had been sloppy. He had been slow. The team inside was waiting. They weren't targets. They were a kill squad. He had frozen. His training, his life, his instincts, all gone. He had frozen for 3, maybe 4 seconds. He heard Anya on the comms. "Elias, they're on me." There, and then just a wet, final sound. He had escaped. They had let him escape. A professional message. He wasn't worth the bullet. He was just the man who had led them to her. He had been in gardening ever since. A self-imposed prison. His slowness, his hesitation, his pathological fear of making a decision. It wasn't a cover. It was the scar. It was the punishment. And now, that punishment was here, in the sunroom. The leader of the squad, the one who had hit Julian, was barking orders in Russian. Spetsnaz. Old school, the kind of men who didn't take hostages. They took assets. Elias saw it all. Julian, the desperate child, had made a deal with the devil to scare his parents, but the devil had just shown up and foreclosed on the deal. Julian was now just as much a hostage as his parents. This was no longer a kidnapping. It was an asset seizure, and the assets, Richard, Mary, and Julian, were all expendable. Elias' legs were shaking. The cold, logical part of his brain, the gardener, was analyzing. The professional part of him was observing. Leader. Dmitri, ex-Vimpel, known associate. 3 others, younger, aggressive, overarmed, cocky. 1 guard on the drive, 1 at the back door. 2 inside with the package. They're not here for the birds or the art. They're here for the bank codes. They will torture Richard. They will. He saw the leader, Dmitri, grab Mary Thorne by the hair. The codes, old man. Or I will break her, Mary whimpered. Richard, for the first time in his life, looked small. It's complicated. Dmitri sighed. He raised his hand to strike her, and the memory of Anya's final, cut-off scream ripped through Elias' mind. The paralysis didn't break. It shattered. It was replaced by a white-hot, clarifying rage. Not at the Thorns, not at Julian, but at himself. He had been given a second chance. The universe, in its infinite, cruel wisdom, had recreated Berlin, right down to the arrogant amateurs and the Russian professionals, and he was not going to freeze again. He was not going to let her die. The slow, useless, trembling gardener faded. The gardener took over. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a team. He had a 20-acre garden, and he was its master. He moved, not to his cottage, but to the pump house, hidden behind a wall of ivy. His hands were steady now. Phase 1. Chaos. He opened the main valve on the irrigation system. The entire estate, in the middle of a bright, sunny afternoon, roared to life. Dozens of high-pressure sprinkler heads erupted. Not just on the lawn, on the windows, the patios, the driveway. Inside the sunroom, the sound was deafening. Like a sudden, violent hailstorm. The world outside vanished behind a wall of cascading water. The 2 men inside with Dmitri flinched, raising their weapons. Their visibility cut to 0. Dmitri yelled in Russian. "What is that?" "Shut it off." The guard at the back door, confused, stepped away from his post to look at the sky. Phase 2. Distraction. Elias moved, low and fast, along the yew hedge. He knew where the back door guard was. He also knew that 30 feet from that door, in the hollow of an old oak, was a paper wasp nest the size of a basketball. He had been meaning to remove it. He grabbed a long-handled rake, scooped the gray, humming nest from the tree, and, in one smooth, practiced motion, flung it. It landed, perfectly, at the guard's feet. The man looked down. The nest exploded. His professional discipline vanished in a cloud of primal, stinging terror. His screams were high-pitched as he ran, swatting at his own face, stumbling blindly into the driveway guard. Phase 3. Darkness. 2 guards were compromised. 2 to go. Elias was at the main circuit breaker, on the outside wall of the garage. He didn't just flip the switch. He pulled the entire block, plunging the 10,000-square-foot mansion into sudden, absolute darkness. More yelling from inside. Phase 4. The breach. Elias moved to his shed. His useless tools. He grabbed a 50-pound bag of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. He grabbed the 5-gallon can of diesel from the ride-on mower, the one Julian so despised. He grabbed a roll of burlap. He was at the sunroom's ventilation intake. He soaked the burlap in the diesel. He poured a small, controlled amount of the fertilizer into the intake fan. He lit the burlap, creating a thick, acrid, non-lethal smoke, and jammed it against the vent. The home's internal air system, now on battery backup, did the rest. It sucked the smoke in and pumped it directly into the sunroom. Inside, it was pandemonium. The lights were out. The room was filling with thick, choking smoke. The automatic alarms, a high-pitched shriek, were now louder than the sprinklers. This was his element. Chaos. He moved, not to the main door, but to the cellar hatch, hidden beneath the rotting azalea plant the one Richard had screamed about. He slipped into the wine cellar and up the stairs, into the darkness he had created. He was a ghost. Dmitri was roaring. He had a flashlight. He was a professional, trying to regain control. Vadim, Pavel. Forget the old ones, find the source. Elias let him yell. He moved past him, into the small, reinforced closet where he knew the Thorns kept their safe room. He had built the shelves in it. He found them, huddled, weeping. Richard and Mary. Who is it? Richard whimpered. Quiet. Elias' voice was a low rasp. You will stay here. You will not move. You will not make a sound. Mary peered at him in the darkness. Elias? The gardener? What are you? Shut up, Elias said. Not with malice, with command. He shut the door, locking them in. One asset secured. Now, the liabilities. He found Julian first, coughing in the hallway. Elias grabbed him, pulled him into a pantry, and put a hand over his mouth. Be quiet. Do you want to live? Julian, terrified, nodded. Where is the last man? Elias whispered. I don't know. The kitchen. Elias left him there, a whimpering, useless mess. He moved to the kitchen. Elias, from behind, used a spool of heavy-gauge garden wire. It was not a kill. It was a truss. A silent, meticulous, inescapable binding. He trussed the man like a plant being staked for winter. One remaining. Dmitri. He walked back into the smoke-filled living room. Dmitri was there, standing over the cowering, blubbering form of Julian, who had crept out of the pantry. The mercenaries' flashlight beam cut through the smoke. So, Dmitri said, his voice calm. He had found a gas mask from the pool chemical closet. It is you. The gardener. Dmitri, like Elias, could see in the chaos. He was a true professional. He knew the other two men were neutralized. Julian, seeing a chance, scrambled to his feet. Wait! Wait! Julian cried, his voice desperate. Has just the gardener. He wants money. We can make a deal. Right? A deal. Dmitri looked at Elias, then at Julian. He understood. Da. Dmitri nodded. A deal. You are good. You are very good. You are wasted on this. Dirt. He gestured at Julian. This Svalok, this trash. He offered us 10 million to scare his parents. A stupid plan. My employers. They want the full asset. The $100 million trust. He turned his flashlight beam onto Elias. But you are a professional. I respect this. So, a new deal, Gardner. You and me. We get the old ones. We get the codes. We take it all. We give this one. He kicked Julian. To my employers. And we split. 30%. $30 million. Julian, seeing his chance, piled on. Yes, 30 million. Has right, take it. They don't respect you. They treat you like Like dirt. I've heard them. My father, he said that plant was worth more than you. 30 million. Take the deal. In the silence, Elias could hear a new sound. A tiny, muffled sob from the safe room closet. Richard and Mary had heard it all. They had heard the offer. $30 million. And they remembered Richard's words. This plant is worth more than a year of your pathetic salary. This was it. Mary gripped Richard's arm, her nails digging into his skin. They were dead. They had sealed their own fate, 2 days ago, over a stupid, wilting flower. He would take the deal. He had to. Why wouldn't he? Elias stood in the smoke. $30 million. He could disappear. He could go somewhere warm. He thought of Anya. He thought of the 3 seconds he had frozen, the 3 seconds of indecision. And he looked at Dmitri. The problem with you, Dmitri, Elias said. His voice, the first full-volume sound they had heard from him, is that you're sloppy. You talk too much. What? And you, he said to Julian, are just weak. Dmitri, realizing the deal was off, raised his weapon. He was too slow. Elias was not aiming for the man. He was aiming for the gas mask. He had grabbed a can of wasp spray from the kitchen. He fired it. A direct hit. Dmitri screamed, tearing the mask off, his eyes burning. He fired his weapon blindly into the ceiling. Elias did not attack. He moved. In the chaos, he used the heavy-gauge wire again. He did not kill. He pruned. He trussed. When Dmitri's eyes cleared, he was on the floor, his hands and feet bound, the wire cutting into his wrists. Elias, his knee on the man's chest, leaned in. Dmitri, his eyes wide with a professional's horrified respect, stared at the man who had taken down his entire team with garden supplies. He breathed one word. Sadóvnik. The gardener? Elias just looked at him. Your Russian is good, Elias said in flawless, unaccented English. But your tactics are 10 years out of date. Berlin sends its regards. When the police, responding to an anonymous tip from 30 minutes prior, finally breached the house, it was to a scene of utter confusion. The sprinklers were still on. The smoke alarms were still shrieking. They found 3 professional, ex-military mercenaries, trussed like Thanksgiving turkeys, neutralized but unharmed. They found Julian Thorne weeping in the hallway, confessing to everything. And they found Richard and Mary Thorne locked, safe and sound, in their panic room. Of the gardener, Elias, there was no sign. He was, as he had always been, just a shadow in the garden. That evening, after the police and the FBI had left, Richard and Mary Thorne stood on their ruined, waterlogged patio. The house was a mess. Their son was in custody. Their lives were in tatters, but they were alive. Richard walked, his feet squelching, over to the wilting azalea plant. He touched one of its pale, blue, dying blossoms. It is worth more than you. He looked at his wife. His face, for the first time in his life, crumpled in a mask of total, abject shame. Mary, he whispered. What have we done? Mary just shook her head, her hand over her mouth, as she stared into the dark, meticulously kept garden. A garden kept by a man they had never seen, a man who had been offered $30 million to let them die, and had, for reasons they would never, ever be able to comprehend, turned it down. Miles away, in a small, clean, one-room cottage on the edge of the estate, Elias was cleaning his tools. He meticulously oiled his shears. He sharpened his edger. He wiped the last of the diesel fuel from the 5-gallon can. He was, as he had been for 10 years, just a gardener. But as he worked, for the first time in a decade, his hands were not trembling. Berlin was quiet. Anya was at peace. He was, finally, just a man in his garden.
If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.